In 1921, Paul Amadeus de Nock, a Swiss-Austrian teacher with fragile health, falls into a one-year-long coma. During this time, his consciousness slides into the future and enters the body of another man in the year 3906 AD. Kingdoms rise and empires crumble, and the knowledge and wisdom from past ages are lost to the foggy ruins of time. But for genuine seekers of truth, one place stands alone on a hill. Shining brightly in the darkness, you, dear listener, have reached the Hidden Citadel.
Hey, welcome to the Hidden Citadel, everybody. This is, I'm your host, Willie Minix, and I am with your other host,
Greg Kemp.
And we are a loud two.
Definitely allowed to.
So, today, we're going to be talking about time travel.
Time travel!
Listen, this is one of those topics that actually has kind of messed with my faith a little bit. So, what if there really are time travelers? And what if some of the biblical stuff was affected by time traveling? This is something that keeps me up at night sometimes.
Here's why it doesn't keep me up at night. I think you could almost view the entire Bible as an intricate blueprint of what time travel is, like the incidents of it, how it's really, how it's not only constructed, how it's maintained, and why it's important. And here's why. We're told about the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. We have a book that describes things in the past, the present, and the future, but they do it in that, what is it, the Eros text, where it's like already but not yet. You have
right.
But then here's the problem. Not problem, but here's the thing. If you have a finite mortality throughout, but you have infinite visitors who are not subject to those things, somehow integrating themselves into the timeline, well, then it kind of that is the evidence of time travel in a way, because they're outside and they're inserting themselves into a timeline or a time. And see, I think if you just look at it, like it's funny. There's this thing that in some of the descriptions of time is not linear. I think time is linear. Space is not.
Right.
So something can enter a timeline that has to be linear.
Right.
But if you look at Gabriel, the angel Gabriel, or any of the angelic beings, they are not subject to a finite sequence. Right. They're not aging, but they're being inserted from eternity into
our timeline.
That's time travel.
But here's my thing. Let's say Gabriel is a time traveler from the future. And it's like, well, if that's the case, people would say, well, that would just throw all of Christianity aside. But basically maybe you haven't said it yet, but it's the conclusion that I'm drawing from it, is even if Gabriel was just some guy from the future, he's still being sent ultimately by God to do his bidding. So it really doesn't matter what he is.
Exactly. But if you're in eternity, and then you get inserted into, a finite sequence, then you are time traveling, because eternity is beyond the end of our mortality. Time. Right? Right.
Yeah, and that's why when we're in eternity, that's why Paul says we're already seated with God, in eternity, even though we're still here on earth in this time.
And that's the part that vexes me, I think, is those present tense statements that Jesus to the thief on the cross, today you will be with me in paradise. Today you will be with me in paradise. He says that. So
Right.
now,
well, and that
very
makes
specific.
you wonder, is paradise subject to the laws of time as well? Because paradise and Hades and all that are not the same as eternity.
Yes.
It's like the millennium is subject to time also, because Isaiah said people that survive, basically this is my take on it, people who survive the second coming and the tribulation, they basically are normal people, but they live an extra long time. Christians are transfigured and they have new resurrection bodies, but those people who don't, it says if they die before they're 100, people will say, "Oh, he was so young."
Wow. Yeah.
And
yeah.
so it's kind of like those millennial people, whoever they are, that eventually the kings of the earth during the millennium rebel against Christ at the end of it when Satan is let loose for a short season. Those people are much longer lived than we are right now, and they but they're still subject to time because you can't say, oh, they lived a long time if they're timeless.
Right, exactly. That's a very good point. I get that. Yeah, it's just when you take something infinite and you reduce it down to the three basic dimensions, or four with space, and you say that Jesus is the Alpha and the Omega. Well, if he's the Omega, he's at the end, right? And then he goes back and gets reduced down to B, C, and C, and then AD, and then AD. That's where he is. Then what is he doing there? Then he is traveling in time.
Yeah,
to
totally.
me, that's what I'm saying. Is that there's
But even when he goes to visit Abraham with the angels,
yes,
and he comes down as the angel of the Lord, it's still a pre-incarnate Christ visitation.
yes.
And he's injecting himself into the timeline.
That's how I see it. That's how that's what makes.
That's pretty cool.
You take the whole Bible, and you take something that in the creation, and then going all the way into, the mansions that are being built. In my Father's house there are many mansions. Like where I'm going. Where did Jesus went? He went back. He went to prepare a place for us, right? So he's going ahead, but then if he returns, what is he doing? He's entering a timeline.
He's going back, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, and I think of like Philip with the Ethiopian eunuch, and he was just whisked off somewhere. Well, if he's when he does that, there are minutes taking place, right? There is time that's elapsing during that, and he is going from one place and appearing in another. You could say, well, it's teleporting. No, that's time traveling. Because you're still in the minute you were, and now you're in another place in the future.
Yeah. Here's the thing I think that why I struggled a little bit is somewhere I read somebody had a theory that Jesus was just a time traveler from the future, and he's just a regular guy, and yet we built a religion around some guy who time traveled from the future. So how do you debunk that? What do you tell somebody and say, well, that's ridiculous?
Yeah. Well, because I think that is really reducing the entirety of Jesus down to one very small feature of him.
That's true.
And so,
the thing that I came up with to debunk it is, even if that were true, it doesn't account for the resurrection.
Not the resurrection, the purpose, the creation, the healing.
Right.
Like there's, he's from the prophecy. How about just love, or just offering people to follow him, and they do. Like
because just some random dude from the future.
There's no reason why a guy. It'd be absurd. It's like who's the writer that was like Lord Liar?
C.S. Lewis.
C.S. Lewis. Like,
Yeah.
or
Liar, lunatic, or Lord.
Yeah. And yeah, if you're going to try to reduce him down to something because you don't want to believe in him, well, you're going to miss out on, that's about, 100th of what he was. You're reducing him
Right.
down to a time traveler. And
Yeah.
that renders him meaningless. But that means that you're wrestling, your eternity is not only at stake, but you're not really wrestling with the entirety of who Jesus is before you're attempting to debunk him or in some way diffuse or dilute Christianity. And so, I mean, you almost look at the function. Why would someone say that? Well, in a lot of ways, when somebody encounters something that's dynamic enough to get their attention that they want to try to oppose it, they create a narrative that makes it easy for them to either dismantle or attack, right? So,
Right, so it's a straw man argument.
Yeah, the Superman. Yeah, so he's a time traveler, but even still, there's just by time traveling alone, there's a lot of elements, including survival, that time travel would have to be miraculous by itself. Obviously.
Well, that's true.
I mean, you're not.
Let's talk about this guy that you mentioned in the intro,
Denock.
Denock. Okay, here's a guy that claims back in the 20s that he went into a coma, woke up in the future, and he saw all these amazing, miraculous things, and basically he had entered into a utopian society. And I was thinking about that. There's something innate in us as humans that we long for a utopian society. I personally think the guy just had a really crazy dream. I don't think that any of the things I don't think he really traveled in time.
No.
I just think it was a hallucination.
Or in a
not
coma.
hallucinate.
Yeah, a coma.
A coma.
Yeah. But
So I think. Have you ever found yourself invited to an event and not really knowing what the right apparel was to wear? If you wear something that's a little too classy, like a suit or something, you might feel out of place if everybody else is casual. If you wear something too casual, you might look around and notice that everyone else is dressed up and say to yourself, I'm just not dressed up for this occasion. Well, here at the Hidden Citadel, we have the perfect solution to this problem. Why don't you go buy yourself a Hidden Citadel tee today, and you can wear it anywhere. It's perfect for every occasion. You can wear it to a casual meeting. You can wear it to a business dinner. You could even wear it to a formal event such as a wedding or a funeral. All of these places and more are appropriate to wear a Hidden Citadel tee. And what's even more wonderful than just wearing the Hidden Citadel tee is you'll be supporting the work that we're doing here at the Hidden Citadel. So why don't you do yourself a favor and go buy yourself a Hidden Citadel t-shirt today. The link is down below in the description. Have a great day. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, in listening to the account of what happened with him, and going into it, I thought it was kind of interesting. And then it got into, the utopian ideal. That's like when John Lennon's imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try, and where you get rid of all things and everything's at peace. Yeah, that all right. If we have that, then there's something called N+1. That means the next step after we have that perfect peace is probably going to be a faulty, self-serving, contaminating, obfuscating step that it's going to ruin whatever that is. So once you say, oh, when everyone's living, he said, this utopian society, people work for 2 years. All right, you're coming up with that because you don't want to work. Right? And then it's like, and everybody gets along. Yeah, because you don't get along with people. That's why you're coming up with it. Then it's like, and people don't get sick. And people are using, there's another part of their brain. Well, you're probably saying that because there's probably some, it's concern about memory loss or concern about dementia. There's concern. So you're creating all the solutions to it. So
because here's the thing. Those things that you're getting rid of oftentimes are the very things that make us the people that we are supposed to be.
Yeah.
You have a difficulty in life and you learn to overcome it, well, then you become an overcomer. You have a brain problem and you learn to reroute and rewire your brain, like stroke victims do, well, then you have overcome that.
Neuroplasticity,
it's like, exactly. Mm-hmm. It's like all of these different things that you want to have a perfect life from are things that God uses in this life to make us better. I think the one thing that I do struggle with sometimes is the concept of an eternity. People, they think this idea, well, eternity is just everything's a utopian, a perfect place. But that's why I think we have the millennial reign of Christ, and it's not a utopian society.
No, it's not.
Because like when you read in one of the prophets, I think it's Zechariah, or maybe I'm wrong about this. I have to look it up, but. Yeah, the hesitation's 1:5. No, it's he talks about how during the millennial reign, if people don't come up to Jerusalem and celebrate Sukkot, then the Messiah will not send rain on their lands.
Yeah, that's not a good thing.
And so it's like that's not a good thing. And then you think about, okay, well, the people at the end of the millennium when they rebel against Christ. Why? Why would they ever do that? Well, if they are forced to come and pay tribute every single year for 1,000 years, that could instigate some resentment, and when Satan comes, he plays on that.
So let's explore that for a second. Because, all right, while I'm listening to this whole account, this Tanakh thing, the bizarre thing about it was, at first I was aggravated. I was just a little annoyed. I was like, okay, all right, you're making this utopia, and you're creating this, these humans that just, it's very socialist. It's very, that nobody wants anything because everything is given to them, and that everything is supplied, so there's no needs, and everyone's working together, and it's the science philosophers and the artists that are ruling. No more of the rich people. This is what it said in the book. And these wealthy people and powerful people. No, it's peace-loving people. And I'm listening to all this, and there's the technology is such, and the language is such that it's more advanced and evolved. And there's a new lobe to the brain that has developed that has made people a lot more self-sufficient, but also peace-loving, and all these great things. And it's just annoying me. And I'm like, oh, come on. You had such a great thing going until you brought that in. And then I was thinking, now wait a minute. There is an account of our new bodies that we're going to be given in some interpretations of the millennial bodies, and we're going to have an earthly existence in what is going to be more transformed than previously formed, right? It's going to be by many people's interpretation, we're going to be existing in a different way. Our human existence, or our earthly existence, is going to be operating in a more advanced state than it is now. There are people that say we're going to be flying and all that stuff. Well, let me just finish.
But we will be.
Well, let me just finish this thing. All right. So let's go back to the N+1 theory. We're given these bodies, but there's still the problem. There's still the problem that the end hasn't happened to wipe out everything, all the sin completely, right? And there's still rebellion. There's still all that. So we're given the heavenly bodies. So it's still our responsibility to be loyal in our hearts to Christ. But I think even in those bodies, it'll be almost like, the Elohim in the garden. Oh, maybe. You were told this, right? But you can also do it for yourself. And that's why it does, the N+1 is, now they can be corrupted in their transformed bodies.
My thinking is, I don't see any of that in the New Testament. From what I understand is, once we receive the new bodies, we ourselves are transformed in the twinkling of an eye. Sin is eradicated within us. And it's like, I think like Adam and Eve, the problem with them, they could be duped because they didn't know anything. We will have a lot more wisdom than they ever did. We'll be more like the angels. And we can get into why the other angels fell in a minute if we need to. But my point is, it's not the glorified saints who are rebelling against Christ at the end. It's the humans who survived the tribulation.
But are they given?
And that's where.
But do they have those?
No, they're not given.
Okay.
No, they don't.
So here's my point though. Is it possible?
They just for some reason live longer.
Is it possible to have the sanctified new body, like you're just talking about, and yet make bad choices? Are you still making absolute good choice? I'm not sure we are. I'm not sure we're able to make perfect choices all the time.
I don't know, because it says that at that point we will have the mind of Christ, and I don't know if that means that we're going to have some kind of weird hive mind. Yeah. I mean, I always think of the Borg. It's like a good version of the Borg, I guess.
What I was wondering there is, even in the new bodies, and it's not rebellion like attack, like in other words, drifting away or rebelling, moving away from God.
It's more like screwing
up. And like you said, hey, you're not going to, and now just basic cause and effect. You don't come to Sukkot, you don't get no rain. That might not even be sin. That might just be, this is what you need to do, and you didn't do it. Now, James would say that's sin. James 4:17.
But that's only referring to the humans.
Yes.
That survive into that. So basically you're talking about when Jesus returns. Yeah. And I don't believe in a pre-trib rapture. I believe that when Jesus returns, the church is raptured up at that point, transfigured. Mm-hmm. We usher him, or we come back in with him to see him do the Joel prophecy, where he basically slaughters anybody that rebels against him. Yeah. But it says in that passage where it's talking about he's in the process of killing everybody who rebels against him. That's where the verse, anyone who calls upon the name of the Lord will be saved. Yeah. And so it's like, if you say, hey, I surrender, then he lets you go. Yeah. And so there's going to be a lot of people, not only in Jerusalem where he's doing this, but also throughout the rest of the world, that survived all the other plagues and all these sort of horrible things that happened during the tribulation. It's a misnomer, or I don't know if misnomer is the right word, but it's a fallacy that the pre-tribbers have come up with, that the entire world is destroyed in the tribulation. It doesn't say that. Yeah. It really just says that about 50% of the population gets destroyed. And then what do you do with the other 50%? Because the judgment doesn't happen until after the millennium.
Well, that's where the Avengers come in, and they get and Tony Stark figures out time travel with the Mobius strip inverted, and
that's it.
And he goes back and brings that 50% back.
No, I think what it is when the millennial kingdom happens, the believers are more like Jedi at that point. I
think so too.
I think what they're going to be is they're like the ambassadors from the king. And they go about and they have a representation. Because God, at that point, it doesn't say that he takes away the dominion that he established with the original fallen angels on Mount Hermon. Yes. There's still, the kingdoms still exist. Right. Now, I do think Israel takes its complete package, if you want to call it that, its complete land area that the Bible prophesies, from the Mediterranean all the way to the Euphrates, and basically from the Gulf all the way up to Turkey. Mm-hmm. That whole area will become Jesus' kingdom, but he allows the other kings to exist and rule their countries because he says they have to come. And it's not the people, it's the kings that have to come and celebrate Sukkot. Yeah. Which is such a funny thing, because it's like in the church, we don't even talk about Sukkot. Most people don't. Well, and for anybody who doesn't know, it's the festival of booths that in the fall time Jews celebrate by making these little huts on the back of their houses that they eat their food in and they hang out and all this kind of stuff during that week-long celebration of when God brought the people through the wilderness, and it's to commemorate them living in tents in the wilderness.
Yes.
And so Jesus says you have to celebrate that during the millennium. We don't even celebrate it now as Christians.
No. Well, yeah, it's okay. So let's go back to our original topic. So look, even a millennium is a swath of time, a linear time. Mm-hmm. It has, in order to be measured as a millennium, it has to have a certain number of years, a certain number of passage of time. So passage of time in a sequence is important here, because that's, Jesus being 33 years old is a passage of time. It is linear there.
Well,
it has to be.
Get this. So Jesus said, and I don't know what passage it is, but you'll remember this when I quote it. He said something about, on one day I'm going away, and on the next, but on the third day I'm going to get there. And a lot of people refer to that as, that was the 3 days in the tomb kind of thing. That's what he was referring to. And I'm like, wait a minute. What if he's talking about the first day I'm leaving to go to heaven, the second day I'll be traveling, and on the third day I'm going to get there? Yeah. What if that's the whole, a day is 1,000 years and 1,000 years is a day?
Yeah.
Well, that would mean that in a 2,000 year period is what's going to elapse from the time that he's ascended until the time that he returns. Yeah. And it's like at the beginning of that third day, whatever that is, that's when he comes back, and then that sets up another 1,000 year period. Mm-hmm. And the whole thing is, it's like, if amillennialism is true and all of this is just metaphorical, why would they use such specific time-related language?
Right.
When they could just be like, well, there will be a period of time, and this era will happen, and that day will happen. But it's always like, it's usually pretty specific. The other thing is, in my book, Hard Rain, Common Questions About the End Times, one of the things I talk about is when the bowls of wrath are poured out, a lot of people talk about, well, those are maybe year-long events, or it could be a 7-year period in each year. But what happens at one point is a bowl of wrath is poured out to where all the water is turned to blood on earth, and it's not drinkable. Yeah. And then the very next thing that happens is a blast of heat comes from the sun that's so hot that people can't, that they're dying from it, okay? Right. If all water on earth is turned to blood for a year, and then the earth heats up so much for a year, like let's say the year theory is what people are talking about, then nobody would survive, because people can only live for 3 days without water.
Right.
They die after that. So basically that sets a time limit for that portion of the tribulation. It's less than 3 days long, because otherwise there would be no water on earth and nobody would survive. Right. And yet we have survivors, so we can time stamp that and say, okay, the day of the Lord, at least we know it's less than 3 days long. Yeah. But I'm saying maybe it's literal. Maybe the day of the Lord is a day.
It's interesting.
Because, if you're going to heat the earth up like that and take everybody's water away, you don't have much time to survive after that.
Now, all right, so does that include, the preppers? Does every single drop of water get turned to blood? Or is it just the natural,
I don't know.
The natural, the oceans and the rivers and that sort of thing?
It could be that when you read about the blood in Egypt, when it happened to the Egyptians, they didn't have any water to drink. Yeah. And so their cisterns and all that was filled up with blood.
Right. It's just...
It wasn't just the Nile that turned to blood. It was everything they had to drink turned to blood.
So, you look at... It's going back to my initial statement that it's almost time travel is an imperative part of the Bible to me. First of all, everything you're looking at, not only the day of the Lord, the years, seasons. There's times to plant. There's times, right? You're operating. Things are very much chronologically described as we move our as we move through our lives. We're not given the same amount of time, but I think in the anointing we're given, there's an importance to all of our lives, no matter where we are in the timeline. But, and you and I have talked about this many times, when they're in the timeline, there has to be travelers that had to have shown us how to operate on this earth. Because if you're just going to be Neanderthals, or if you're just going to be, these developing humanoid things, they're just trying to survive. There are seasons, there's all kinds of detriments, and yet when during just basic survival do they say, Thag, go dig down deep, pick up rock, put rock in fire, turn to iron, make weapon.
A good example of that is just watch any survival show.
Yeah.
And if you watch any survival show that's out there, basically what you see is it is hard. And I don't care if it's one guy surviving out in the woods or if it's a group of people surviving out in the woods. It is difficult. And if you're only on the edge of survival, you don't have time to sit there and say, oh yeah, I think we're going to set up something to worship some god that you've concocted. Unless there's some reason to do it. There has to be an initial, and this is where the Ancient Aliens guys, I think, are kind of on the right track, but they get a little sidetracked. Yeah. I believe that they like to think that aliens came, took a bunch of Neanderthals or early humans or whatever, and gave them intelligence, and then said, okay, you're going to be our slaves, and you're going to work for us. I don't think it was that way. I think the Bible makes a lot more sense where we were created in fellowship with God.
Yes.
And then for however long that lasted until the fall, there was this fellowship with God. And who knows what kind of amazing things were done during that time period. And then the fall happened. And then the question is, how much... Like, I listen to some people that are pre-Adamites, and they're like, well, there was a whole time period before Adam came that these angelic beings ruled on the earth. And it's like, well, you don't have to have that necessarily. You can have the angelic beings ruling after Adam and before Noah during that time period. It's like we can't even really know what was before Adam.
Nope.
Except for the part where it says, and the earth became, in some translations, it became formless and void. And it's like, well, that's an interesting thing. What happened?
Is there something, I want to say Ezekiel or Isaiah, that talks about something? There's a little bit more of a clue, other than the became. There's something about... you and I have talked about it. I got to think.
Is it Jeremiah where he saw cities or something?
Yeah,
before?
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's in Jeremiah.
Yeah, I mean, when you just think about, like, all right, I mean, you could say Adam is a time traveler, and here's why. God planted the garden, and then made a fully grown man. Now that means there was no birth to gestation and development all the way up until he took him out of time and created and inserted a man into a timeline, right?
Yeah.
It didn't develop him, from
and
a baby.
He was completely cognizant. He could sit and communicate with God.
And then gave him instruction. Adam did, how did he know? So, he was giving him instructions on how to manage this creation.
Well, and animal husbandry. The first thing God said is go and name all the animals. How did he come up with all those words? Yep. And that's a cataloging system that he was coming up with. Number two, how long did that take?
Right.
I mean, we're still cataloging things after what? When did they first come up with the binomial nomenclature? That was in the late 1700s.
Yeah, I think so.
So from the late 1700s until now, we're still cataloging animals and plants and things like that, and giving them a name in Latin, and we're not finished.
No, I know.
How long did it take Adam to do all that before he looked around and said, I need a partner?
Yeah.
It could have been thousands of years that Adam was around, you know? Like this whole idea of a young Earth where the Genesis... who's that group in Kentucky?
I know, with Ken Ham?
Answers in Genesis people.
Ken Ham.
Yeah. Ken Ham. Their whole shtick is, well, you weren't there, and, you know, God did everything in 6 literal days. I'm okay. If you want to say God did everything in 6 literal days, I'm not going to gripe about that or argue with that. But where I am going to gripe is that you can't look at the biblical timeline and say, well, Adam was around for this many years, because that's only, I believe, from the fall to when he died.
Yep.
He could have lived for 20 billion years
we don't know.
Before that. We don't know.
Yeah. I mean,
there's no way of knowing.
Right. But also then he was given, you know, I can't remember what scripture. I got to look it up. I got to be more prepared for these. There's a scripture that says that you derive truth from creation.
Okay.
And I don't remember where I read it recently, so it's got to be like, you know, in the early parts of maybe like Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, somewhere on there, because I just read it.
It sounds like a proverb kind of thing.
But in doing so, okay, there's a couple of things here. First of all, you know, creation has all of these elements that God, and we have to. It would take us a long time to discover them, but we're given information from the Eternal One. You know, from the eternity from infinite to finite, and I still say that's time travel, because there has to the taking of information, something from where it's outside of time and bringing it in, inserting it into time, is jumping from one place to another. Right?
Sure.
So we're given that. So what is that? All right. So, but now, what is prophecy? Prophecy, in very definition,
is time travel.
Is time travel. But in very definition, prophecy is truth. You are telling the truth about something that is not of this time, but from another time to happen. And by the way, most of the time it's a vision. It's an experience that has taken place in another time that is being
that somehow you're seeing.
In your one of your senses is engaging a truth from another timeline.
And the other thing that gets me, I got 2 things I want to say. The first thing is, sometimes it's incredibly specific, like the Cyrus prophecy that they pointed to it and they said, "Look, Cyrus, you were prophesied 200 years ago by Isaiah," and he was like, "Whoa," you know. But then the other part of it is this idea of I lost my train of thought. You know, a couple years ago, I used to be an intelligent person.
I remember that.
And then, and then about 2 years ago, for 2 weeks, I ran a really high fever. Don't know what I had, but I was so sick, and it was like afterwards, now I have a really hard time. I think I had some brain damage that happened because it's like sometimes I have a real hard time getting the word that I'm trying to get out. Yeah. And I take this stuff called nettokinase, and whenever I take that regularly, I don't have this problem for some weird reason. But whenever I don't, and I'm out of it, and I ordered a new batch that hasn't come in yet, and it's like I just can't keep my train of thought. And it's so weird. It's like it literally happened after I ran that fever for 2 weeks.
This episode of Hidden Citadel is sponsored by nettokinase. Nettokinase.
Yeah. I wish they'd send me free ones. That'd be nice. Brain damage.
Word retrieval be gone. Word retrieval be gone.
Anyway, we were talking about prophecy. The vision aspect of it. Visions are one of those things that not just were given to God's people. Yeah. It seems like other cultures of that time were somehow able to have visions of the future too. And I think it's like a residual effect of the of the holiness that happened before the fall.
Right.
And so after the fall, they gradually got to where it was less and less and less, and so they started to develop ritualistic magic to try to come up with a way to where they could experience this kind of stuff, and the hallucinogenic drugs became a part of it.
Yeah.
And it was like they were always looking for some sort of a vision. And then I think the demonic entities latched onto this and was like, well, not only latched on, but they showed
Caused
them
it.
how to.
Yeah.
That's what the cutting of roots was all about.
Right. Well, but I
think
that's
that they
the
were
N+1.
able before. Yeah, I think they were able to have visions and things like that of the future prophetic events.
Mm-hmm.
And then as their lineage went on and got further away from God, I think that stopped. And that's probably what propelled them into embracing occult practices that the demons brought up.
So that goes back to my other thing. We're given something. All right, let's go back to Adam and Eve in the garden. They're given this. Then there's that N+1, where that means you have the thing. Oh, but you can have this. It's not, the temptation is, it's not only, it's and. You can have this and this. So we're given how to operate in our creation. All right, operate in your creation, and this is what your the instructions are, and this is how you can live long in the land. Okay, yeah. And I would like to have intercourse with this tree.
Right.
And to and to make a naiad or a dryad or something, or
right.
an ent. You can do that. No, you can't. There's no N+1. But we're so susceptible to, when we're on the path that is straight, to just move off of that path.
Yeah.
But I want to go back to something.
That brings up. Oh, go ahead.
I want to go back to something. All right, time travel. We're still, when we talk about it generally speaking, the discussion of time travel is a volitional, kinetic, and intentional movement of someone in time, and it's an acceleration to or from some place to another location, there or back, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm not sure that's entirely it's not the entirety of time travel, because the day of Joshua is the stopping of time. That means time wanted to move and it stopped. Okay?
Yep.
The thing that I think is very similar is, because it almost tells us exactly like the physics of time and the physics of what God has created, is the Exodus event where the waters are parted and dry. All right? So a lot happened there. They're parted, and then there has to have been something that accelerated the evaporation.
It said the wind blew. It said the wind blew all night and dried.
And it dried it. Okay, so evaporation it had to have taken place at an accelerated rate. All right, but what does that waters do? That water wanted to move. That water was
and it was held in
place. And then once they were across, it went boom and became a violent event. Well, there's one other time that happened. The lions in the lion's den. The lions.
Well,
that was
not just one other time. There's several, because remember when they crossed the Jordan and the Ark of the Covenant caused the water to back up? And another one is when Moses, the longest fast in the Bible, Moses goes up on the mountain for 40 days and he fasts. He comes down, breaks the commandments, tells everybody they have to eat the gold that was the golden calf and drink it. And he goes back up on the mountain, not having eaten in that time period, and he spends another 40 days up on the mountain not eating.
Yeah.
I don't think he spent 80 days not eating. I think he stepped, somehow when he got in the presence of God, he stepped out of time.
Yes. Now we're talking. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Once that's what time travel is. But wait, I'm going back to almost the physics. All right, so you stop the sun. You stop the water, but when you release the water, there's a kinetic energy that had built up that made it a violent event for anybody who was still in that water, which were the Egyptians, right?
Right.
And I think the same thing happened in the lion's den. Because God, it says, put his hand on the mouths of the lions, right? There's many ways to interpret that, but it's really what happened afterwards. They did something.
They ate the people.
Not only that, they ate the people in midair. All right.
Yeah,
they
were rending them as
like
they were coming in.
You were to take a lion, getting ready to spring, okay? And you stop him. Now, think about it. Like, you put him on pause, and all that energy's going up, and then you let him go. What's going to happen? Boom! He's going to do something almost supernatural. Not supernatural. He's doing something. He's making up for the time
he's pent
that
up.
should have been right. Exactly.
Well, it's this whole thing about Bruce Lee's 1-inch punch. The whole idea of the 1-inch punch is that you're building up so much kinetic energy that when you let that punch go, it's powerful.
Yeah.
But if you're just going to do a 1-inch punch, there's nothing. You have to build up the power first before you release it into whatever you're hitting. I had to throw Bruce Lee in there.
Always. It's one of the greatest adverbs there is. How did that happen? It happened Bruce Lee. It was
Bruce Lee. It did.
Bruce Lee. It did. But going back, I think the definition of time travel is not the traveling of time, but the manipulation of time. In other words, we're not.
Yeah.
If time travel is taking place, which I think it is in the Bible, the idea is not we are subject to time, we are fettered to time, but time can be manipulated. Now that can mean you can move through it, you can stop it, you can go like that's what time travel really should be. The physics of it should be not just a highway to and from something, because then you're kind of still subject to it. It is that you have dominion, that those who time travel have dominion over time.
They're
time
lords.
Guess who those people? Right, and time lords. And guess who those would be? Well, the Elohim.
Doctor Who.
Yeah. Exactly.
I want to go back to the N+1 thing for a minute. You talked about N+1 is basically us falling short, and that's why when Jesus, they said, teach us to pray, I think it's a pernicious doctrine that's invaded the church, is this idea that once you've said the sinner's prayer, you're good, past, present, and future, your sins are forgiven. And it's like, well, if that was true, why did Jesus teach us to pray, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us? And this is a daily way that we're supposed to pray.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a future thing. And it's like, it's because God knows that we're going to fall every single day. Yeah. We're not perfected yet. Yeah. And we have to, our goal is to become more and more sanctified and try to be more and more like Him. But we're never, ever going to get to that point to where we are perfect and we never commit a trespass. And the idea of saying, well, I don't have to ever ask for forgiveness, try that with your kids. Right. If you tell your kids, look, you were born, the day you were born, I have forgiven you, past, present, and future. Is that really going to make them become good people? Or would you like them to get in the habit of saying, hey, I wrecked the car, I'm really sorry? Or they're like, I wrecked the car, it's okay. Dad's forgiven me, past, present, and future. I don't even have to tell them that I wrecked the car.
No, because, it's already gone. It's already done. Yeah. It's out of time. So there's no cause, no effect. There's... Exactly. What you sow, you're not going to reap. No.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. Yeah. It's an illogical theological statement, but there's so many of them. And I mean,
well, here's another.
We need to do a whole episode on Calvin.
You know what we should do? We should do a podcast on this sometime. Oh, we are. We really should just record what we say. These conversations. We are.
Yeah, right. They're so good.
So let's look at this. Going back to the Adam thing. Okay. So here's another, I think, an example. It's just kind of a different kind of example of time manipulation and the example of how things should be structured in time, which is a sequence of small to large, of microscopic to macro, right? That's how things move. Now, we're given, and miraculously, we're given a brain that, or really a mind, that when information is given to us, it automatically gets put in an organized fashion where we can find it, where we can understand it, where it's some people, psychologists will say it's an executive functioning system. Immanuel Kant, the philosopher, called it a priori knowledge. And he likened it to, and he just said, like when we're given information, how does it know where to go? Well, it
Right.
means that we're given, when information comes in, there is something that's already developed, meaning out of time, it's given, because it didn't go from time to become that, immediately in place. So,
It's a file system on a hard drive.
Right, but even still, a hard drive does not know where to put everything intelligently.
No, but the mind, that's what's
Yes.
cool. That's why the mind is not part of us.
Right, but if I take...
That's why we're seated at the right hand
Yes.
of Christ already, because our mind is there
Yes.
once we become saved, but the file system is our
Yes.
brain.
But so...
It's the hard drive that stores it all.
But so the kind of the I mean, it says we're fearfully and wonderfully made. And the wonderfully made part, and I'm fascinated by this idea that if I take a dump truck of 1,000 books and I throw them into a library room, they are not going to shelve themselves and organize themselves per author and accessibility and topic and content and size and color by themselves. But that's what happens.
Right.
That's how we're made. We're made. So
Yeah.
in development, there's a time travel that we are made, already developed into something that would take a linear millennium for us to develop over time, if it were evolving, and yet it's put in place immediately. So it's not something, when something is created in its mature form, then it's a time travel of sorts, because it's taken,
Exactly.
It's not on the line of a microscopic and undeveloped to fully developed.
Yeah. It's basically, this brings up an idea that I had. I think for Christmas, we need to do a show on the topic Scrooge.
Uh-huh.
Was he really a jerk, or was he just autistic?
Oh, that's a good one. That's true.
That'll be one of our Christmas episodes.
Yeah, I mean, he maybe just didn't read faces that well. Just kind of blurred.
That's what I'm thinking.
Made people
maybe
mad.
he had Asperger's or something.
I think so. I could have. Yeah.
He wasn't really a bad
No.
guy. He just couldn't help it.
Yeah. But yeah, he's another one with that's all about time travel. His thing.
That's true. Oh, and that's where
days
ghosts
future.
come in too.
Yeah.
Because ghosts technically are time travelers.
Yes.
Because they're representing something from the past. And I think both of us have had encounters with what we could... We need to do a whole show on ghosts, too, at some point. Because we both kind of encountered those sort of situations before.
Yeah, we had a house. That was... it's funny. I think one of the things that I was so fearful of when I was little was any sort of haunting or anything like that. And yet I lived in this house that was just so regularly doing things. It was like... And I think when you have kids, you don't think about what scares you. You think about just other things. I think it's just kind of like...
Well, I think, too, the fact that your dad was a pastor, you might have had demonic attack.
Yeah.
It may not have just been ghosts, It's hard to say, but I'd like to hear more. I think we need to do a whole episode on that. That would
I think
be
so, too.
Interesting.
Well, we got a lot to cut. We got a lot because, we've both witnessed some supernatural things and that sort of thing, so... I love this time travel. I almost feel like we should do another. We could actually do.
Yeah, we could do a part two sometime.
On this. Yeah, but I'm so glad we had this time, man. This is really cool.
Yeah, I think that pretty much wraps it up, folks. We will be back next week, maybe with part two, or we might go on to another topic and then and revisit this in the future at some point. But the fact is, we're the hosts of the Hidden Citadel. That's what you've been listening to, and I hope that you've gotten something out of it. If you do, please, the only thing we're really asking people for at this point is just tell your friends about us and pass our podcast on to them if you know somebody that's really into strange and bizarre things like we are. Oh, wait, I forgot to tell you. Guess where I'm going? Maybe, I don't know if you can read
Cryptorama
this.
all-night creature features. Let's go.
Yeah.
Moth Man. Oh,
The
the
Moth
Moth
Man.
Man.
Tomorrow, I'm going to be at the Moth Man Museum in Point Pleasant, West Virginia.
That's a little cool.
It's really cool. I've been there several times, but I gotta go pick up Gideon, my son, from he's staying with my relatives in Indiana, my mom and dad and my brother. And so I'm going to pick him up, and we're meeting at the Mothman Museum.
Oh.
So I think we need to do an episode on the Mothman at some point in the future, too. Trevor, my wife, she was like, well, what is the Mothman demonic? And I was like, well, we don't know. I mean, that's the whole thing, because he did warn, like, it seems like he was warning people that the bridge was going to collapse. But then again, but what's cool about the Mothman is there's like tons of credible sightings of the Mothman. It was, and by people who were like police officers and people that weren't prone to just come up with strange tales, So I think that would be a really fun one. So I'm going to try to get as much info while I'm there, and maybe take some video or something.
And maybe talk about it next time.
We could definitely talk about the Mothman next time. I will actually send you some research stuff that you can listen to, so that we can. So that's it, people. We'll be doing the Mothman.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Love that.
All right. Until next time. God bless you, people. Hang in there and
stay in the Citadel, because the night is coming. The watchman replies, morning is coming, but night